so vivid in me if I look at myself and why I've been starting companies, and if I get to dream what a company could be, then it doesn't look like what companies usually are. If I get to dream, then a company is something that is fulfilling and rewarding for myself and everyone who somehow touches that company, which could be employees, partners, clients, and just society at large. So if it's something where I can allow my ideas, my passions, and so on to take shape and become something which supports me not only financially, but also allows me to actually be more of who I am, not less of who I am, which has been my main experience of running companies, is that I have to become someone I'm not when I put on that suit, so to speak. And I have to adapt to a lot of things which are actually they're not feeling authentic to me. So what if a company could be a place where I can be authentic, where people can connect with the company if they want to? There's not really a barrier to it. So if you are feeling called to somehow be part of this journey, you can. And also something that is taking into account a much more long-term perspective. Like, what is this? What do I want this to lead to over time? What is truly important for me? What are the core values and guiding principles that I truly care about, that I really want to be honored and kind of protected over time, which could be, beyond my lifetime, and make sure that all of that isn't just kind of consumed by a system and stamped into the ground, and then I have the experience of having to conform into something that I don't wish to be, that I am not, which was not the intention of me even starting the thing in the first place.
If I dream into why I've been thinking that I should do something that matters in the world, like that's been my lens. Like, I want to do something that matters in the world, not that leaves an imprint, but something that matters. Then the main thing has been like, how do we become more equitable? Like, how can I put my gifts and my privilege and my position in the world to use in such a way that it could serve others that didn't have that starting point or didn't have that. So how can we build resources and build platforms for other people to thrive off of, and also so that I can thrive, of course. And in a way, I think this shifting of resources, instead of me taking it and putting it in some like hidden place or like a locker or a bank account or whatever somewhere else, to keep it in flow and let it sort of circulate through more people and many people, and maybe even like make sure that I'm okay, make sure that others are okay, and this just introduce this concept of enough. Like, what if there's a place for me, even as a business person, to say that I have enough now. Now I can, like, the structure helps me to see that I have enough and helps me to start sharing with others. And again, that's what I feel like the RCO has the potential to do. Of course, if we design it in a clever way and like use the structures in a good way, but there's room for that in our legal system. And I find that we've kind of rediscovered a lot of that room, and like at least created some nice questions for people to lean into, to find out what's enough for them, and like what's the motivation that you have, and what, like all of that stuff. And of course, from my side, again, to make impact, to make a difference, a sustainable difference. That is like my deepest motivation and my deepest desire when it comes to this stuff.
If you want to create an organization, if you want to build a company in this world, that at least that narrative, the story that I somehow grew up with or learned along the way, is that either I create a for-profit company, and then the main thing is the profit, and it's meant to be as much as possible. Expand, build this company, make it as big as it can be, so I can profit as much as possible. Like, that's one narrative. Be the tallest tree in the forest. And then there's another story which is like, no, you should not care about money or profit at all. You should be a non-profit, when it's all about purpose, and then all of a sudden you are not even allowed to think about money for yourself because you're only doing it for someone else. So one story is just for me, and the other one is just for the world. And the in-between story has been missing. And over the recent years with kind of impact entrepreneurship, I'm seeing a third story, which a lot of times is build something big that benefits you first and then kind of save the world, or build something big on top of something that is improving the world. But most of those companies are still in a mold, in a form, which is the for-profit company only. And if it's still the for-profit company only, there's so many structures that we put up that just makes it really difficult to not have profit first, but have some other kind of purpose first. And to me, that is why we're exploring the RCO, why we started exploring it, why we're putting it into the world. I do think it's viable. I think it actually allows us to explore some kind of middle ground where it's about me and you and the world all at once. And it's about purpose and profit all at once, but not profit first.
It's a vehicle, it's a legal construction, which is with an intention of unifying or like putting purpose first and then putting like gathering resources for this thing. And so the two components that it has from a legal point of view is an association, a non-profit association, and a limited company. And these two are connected in a number of different ways. I think the most important, probably two connections are there's a 10% ownership stake that the association holds. And the second part is that the association has a right, those 10% kind of give them, we employ the association to appoint 50% of our board in the limited company. So the limited company is partly governed by people that have mainly joined the exploration for the non-profit side. So they're very much looking out for and are driven by the purpose motivation. They're there for that particular point. And so that relationship allows us to have some sort of democracy in the company, because normally companies are not democratic. It allows us to have something that puts into conversation the economic lens, like the profit perspective, and the purpose, the ideal perspective, like this idea that we are trying to put into the world. And hopefully that will generate some tension, that will generate some friction, and that friction can be put to use skillfully if we can kind of have that conversation in a generative way together, not sort of either start agreeing with each other or start yelling at each other. If we can hold that middle ground and like really see that there's validity and we need to allow for like these different perspectives, like it becomes like a way of including like the both and perspective. It's not either this or that, it's both. And that will, what we think and what I've seen in my life, give more life, more value, more everything, that just increase the potential. The connective tissue, if you will. I think that's sort of the last point that I would bring in. That's sort of the third part. And from a legal point of view, it doesn't exist, right? But it is a constitution that we have decided to call like a source code. We just labeled it. That's a source code for both of these entities, that both of these entities share. And that's like a container for these two. We have two circles and then like a circle that's holding that whole thing together. And that's the source code. And that's just touching on principles, it's touching on what we are aiming to do, what is sort of the basic problem that we're addressing, what are the key mechanisms for our interactions. And it's really as little as possible to give as much freedom as we think that we could manage in these two entities, but still to just set a direction and a frame and take responsibility for those basic things. So we have ways of interacting in this entity.
If your purpose is just to make money, you shouldn't set up an RCO. You should just start a company. But if there's another purpose, whatever that may be for you, you start with that. You put that into the source code document, the constitution, and then that trickles into a limited company, and a nonprofit association. And the association honors the purpose, and these two entities are connected. Like you skillfully described, the association has a say in the business. It can't take over the whole thing, but it has a say. And it's there to safeguard the purpose. So it's not all about business. It's still about purpose. And that's the core structure of it. And then there are some additional options to it that you can add. So the initial RCO is one association and one limited company. But you can add more limited companies to the same RCO if they share the same purpose. The business can be vastly different, but as long as the purpose is the same, you can connect them all to the same nonprofit association and basically just create more energy in the system without it becoming just one thing. So it's not everything turns into one company. It's we share a purpose and we are trying to support it in different ways through different businesses. That to me is also an addition that's also not a must, but there's potential there. And then quite obviously in the times that we live, where a lot of new financial systems and currencies are being explored, Web3, blockchain, and so on, this kind of structure lends itself, probably at least, quite nicely to that. It could be connected to DAOs, it could be connected to its own currency supporting a purpose, and so on.
It really has to do something with like the society that we live in, which is very creation and birth and like light and ascent oriented. And the way that we've been looking at living systems, we've been looking at them, you know, one way of saying it, fancy word, is like it's a dissipative structure. Another way of saying it, like it seems like there are three phases in most living systems. It's like a birth phase, a growth phase. There's some sort of sustaining phase, like a maturation phase. Like there's minor changes going on, but you're not like really growing that much anymore. And then there's a decay phase, like a death phase, ultimately. And so we've put that into the company as well. And the regenerative community organism, it's like there's a clue there, the organism part. That's how we think about it. So what if this thing is actually living? What if this thing is actually a collection of living beings that are living together under this umbrella, like through this thing? And so when we are created, when we create this thing, we put this on the market, we are going to have to grow to some sort of size that feels reasonable, probably. That's big enough, if you will. And what happens then? Well, we're probably going to have to mature, and then there might be so that we're generating a surplus. What can we do with that surplus? Perhaps we can, to borrow sort of the garden analogy, it's like, can we store that into the soil? Can we put it back into the soil? And the way that we think about the soil then is the association. Association is like where the community is gathering, where we are passionate about this topic, and there might be needs for us to do research projects, or maybe there's like a new business idea that wants to start that doesn't have anything to do with the first business, but it's like a different company or something like that. So we're pushing these resources into the soil, into the association, probably as an investment company, and then giving this investment company like an idea of like, please deploy these resources in a wise way to support the purpose in the best way. And then eventually, as the soil is kind of getting stale and like maybe it's you know, people are moving elsewhere, the rains have gone, like maybe there's been erosion in that way, to stick with the analogy, then there's a way for us to distribute what's left. And so then there's a decay phase, like where we can actually kill this thing. This thing gets to die, and it dies in such a way that it's actually buried in the ground, and in that ground it will completely decompose. And so we're redistributing all the resources, all the people, all the potential IP, all of these things, again, instead of them sort of going away into a cabinet somewhere or being locked up somewhere and somebody else keeps making money or like extracting from them, we'll give them back to the ecosystem so that they can start sprouting new plants and start sprouting new, it could become a new meadow where there needs to be a meadow at that point, if you will, because surroundings might have changed.
And to add one tiny detail there, so we start with two entities, limited company, nonprofit association. If you add the life cycle, then towards the end of the life cycle, in the fertilization/death process, we use a third entity, which is a time-limited foundation. So it's a foundation structure, but with a set time. So you only have 5 or 10 or 20 years, whatever you decide at that point, to redistribute all the remaining resources and assets to your surrounding ecosystem. And it might be worth mentioning that these 3 entities are really common in most legal jurisdictions around the world, which should mean that the RCO should be viable in most jurisdictions around the world.
But there seems to be 3 themes that come back, at least 3, but 3 themes that come back. Like, so one theme that I've seen in people that are seeming to be interested in the RCO are people that have been and have worked a lot with associations or with like non-profit work. So people that have a very strong core, like a very passionate sort of maybe an activist agenda to like actually really try to change something. And a lot of the inquiries there are like, we need more resources. How do we accumulate? Like, how do we make? How do we do the resource thing? Like, how do we get funding for this? We're tired to eat noodles and have nowhere to live. You know, like I can't make this work in this way. So I need resources. I'm an activist who needs resources. That seems to be like one part. And then I think the key question in that domain that I've been like what's been needing the most sort of coaching or like working out has been like the business idea, so to say. How do you formulate a stringent business idea that people will fund? So that's probably the key question to look at, because you know already how to build a community and you know like all these other things that are hard for if you come from a different lens.
A second one, which is very much me in many ways, is the entrepreneur. The person who has this drive, the ideas, the passion to create something. And most of the time, this something is about, you know, making a dent in the universe, changing something through business. And the RCO seems to be relevant for entrepreneurs who really strive for something more than just the big paycheck, who look at their role in the world as something a little bit bigger, perhaps, or want to just have an impact in another way. Then an RCO structure seems to be a relevant way forward for them. So entrepreneurs who care about society or the future of humanity, or however you'd like to phrase it.
Potential third one would be, I think, the community builder. Like, there are these people I find that are like kind of surfing. Like they're fine. They have enough money. They're fine with that, and like they do interesting things. But what they're really passionate about is like gather people around something, or like to really look at something. And I think that's a perfect application for the RCO as well, because it has those components. It has the components of like putting an idea out front to call people in, and then if you're courageous enough, which has been like a struggle for me personally, but it's like if you're courageous enough, then just let it go. Like let people run with it and create their things around that thing, and like accumulate resources around that thing, and like distribute the resources in the community, and like really use these like social aspects and social dynamics, and like have fun, like play with it and generate resources at the same time. The RCO is a really good structure for like, let's figure it out together, because you can have all these things that are related, but they're definitely not the same thing. Like you know, it's like you have this passion about, I don't know, we talk a lot about inner development, right? So somebody might be really passionate about working with individuals, and someone else might be really passionate about working with organizations. And so like, should they be one company? Probably not. But do they like share the same passions? Can they have like a lot of exchange around like how to build their businesses and how to understand the world and frameworks and all of that stuff? Yeah, probably. So like there's an arena in the middle, and there were 2 companies, and that could also be the RCO, so to say.
There's potential for kind of multi-layered community with the RCO. So the natural way in is to join the nonprofit association, and that's open to anyone. So what actually then happens is that since the nonprofit association is connected to at least one limited company, then there's an opening for anyone who cares to actually get connected to that company. Let's say Tesla was an RCO, and you cared about, you know, a future of electric vehicles and what that might mean for society. You could join. You don't have to be hired or get employed or become a partner of Tesla. You could join the nonprofit association that has a say in what Tesla does. So you can't take over the control, but you can join it, and you can be part of it, and you can help nudging it towards the future. And for Tesla in this case, for the company, there's an opening for community. Beyond, buy the t-shirts and join a fan club kind of thing. There's actually an association, and it's all governed by a shared purpose. And then there's another layer of community, which is a community of business creators or entrepreneurs around a shared purpose. So if we have one company and there's this other company and we share the same purpose and we're connected to the same nonprofit association, then we're connected to the same RCO structure. And that has not been done yet. That has not been tested. So this is just theories, right, and ideas so far. But that should create kind of a community of entrepreneurs. Like, yeah, we're doing different businesses, but we are not only thinking and saying that we have the same purpose, we're even connected to the same purpose from a legal point of view. It just creates connection and most likely engagement and support and,
and accountability.
Accountability and also, and most likely we become ambassadors. Yeah. So we keep each other accountable and we're supporting each other. Kind of like friends do. So it's a potential friendship structure for companies in a sense. There are most likely more groups, more personas that this is relevant for that we just haven't seen yet because it's still early days. Like we've been working on this thing for more than 3 years, but it's only now that it's actually becoming visible and getting placed into the world so we can see what happens beyond the ideas. The process of exploring these perspectives have, for me personally, been, and they still are extremely valuable because I get to face myself and I get to understand what's driving me and what am I willing to do and not do, and not just say, hey, here's a cool idea, let's start a company and let's see how it goes, which has been the way I've been doing things for most of my career. And I think a lot of people are doing that. Like, I want to create this thing, it's gonna work, let's just do it. Let's just create a company and it's going to be fine. While this really allows me to kind of see what I want to create and then just pause and kind of look at myself and the people around me and really explore, why am I doing this? What am I willing to invest in this? How do I want it to evolve over time? And for me personally, it's allowing me to really hold myself accountable and be as conscious as I possibly can in every step along the way. So I'm not just rushing blindly into something, chasing something that I don't even know why I'm chasing. I'm actually taking the steps consciously, and that might lead to me not starting the thing, which is fine because I'm learning so much about myself in the process. And the next thing that I start will most likely be just much more aligned and authentic and true to who I am as a human being and what I actually wish to create in this world. To me, it's about, I think reading up on these things and perspectives is one thing, just trying to like consume it and see what happens in you. And then if you feel resonance, if you feel that there's something here that I want to explore, but that's enough. Like, you just need to feel that there's something here you need to explore or want to explore. You don't need to know that you want to start an RCO. Then the process begins. And the process, the way I see it, is that either you just do it all yourself based on what you find online. Totally fine. You can also do it with support from us. And that process in itself really goes into what you're just speaking to. At least in my point of view, it starts with the personal. Like, who are you right now in your life? Where are you at? What do you need? What do you hope for? What are your wounds? What are your fears? To really allow yourself to explore that in the process of creating a company or an organization.
One quote like Gregory Bateson, he says, like, the main problem about the world, like the main problem for most people is like the difference between how we think the world works and how the world actually works. And so I think that's the problem, or like that's the gap that we're trying to close with the RCO. And it is a deeply personal process, and it is a deeply systemic process. And like those things need to come into relationship with one another. And on the webpage, which you're probably on, or otherwise you can go and visit it on rco.life, there are a bunch of resources like articles and podcasts, and there will be more podcasts, and there might be like a program, and there might be other stuff. We are available as coaches if you want to engage us directly. and then just reach out and we'll set up a call and we'll talk to each other. And other than that, I think there's also like a way to just be inspired and take it, because this is a free thing. This is a structure that we've dreamt up. We've applied it in one context, which makes sense through our lenses. And there are other ways to put this thing together. Like it's just like a bunch of building blocks that you can take and use and like get familiar with. And maybe it will put you in a good place, in that regenerative direction. And that's what we're hoping to achieve. Businesses that create more life. That would be wonderful. So feel free to reach out if you have a comment or your own model, or if you want to work with us. That'd be awesome. And otherwise, just go explore and we'll see where we go.